So you're a Lego designer and you're finding Adobe Illustrator quite difficult. You have a lot of ideas, you've been sketching, you get a logo design gig, you make a very brilliant sketch, but in order to transform that creativity into vector format and submit it onto your client as a logo, you need to vectorize it with Adobe Illustrator. But then this whole interface, everything here begins to look too confusing and challenging to you, therefore limiting your creativity and furthermore limiting your earning power as a logo designer, which is something you don't want to, it is some place you don't want to find yourself in, and probably you're already in that position right now, you're finding yourself in that particular position. So Adobe Illustrator looks kind of intimidating. You hear people talk about it, how they use it, and you think it's something from the future, you think it's something quite challenging, something that you need to be some of the smartest people on the planet to be able to master all of this confusing and intimidating looking things here, you get me? So you think you're not up for it? Well, that's why we're here. We're going to have to make this thing easy for you to understand and actually show you that okay, this thing is quite simple, it's not something to be so scared of, right? So this is a pure Adobe Illustrator course, and to do that we're going to have to start from the basics. We're going to have to start with the essentials and the basics. Now the first thing you want to do, even though I've done that already, but I'm going to have to take you back to what I've done. When you click on the Adobe Illustrator, first you have to install it, and I'm sure you probably have it installed on your PC right now. So you're going to have to fire it up, which is not something I have to teach you. Go to wherever you have it on your PC. If it's on your home screen, left click on it, double click on it, and fire it up. Now when you launch it for the first time, you might not see all of these things. Now this is an already preset page and workspace and everything. You might not get to find everything I have here, but one thing you might see is just what you have up here, you get me? You might just see this column here. That's the only thing you might put, and every other thing here will just be point out blank, you get me? So what you want to do, you don't have to panic at that point. What you want to do is go to file here, from file click on new, and from there we're going to be able to set up our document and begin to design whatever it is we want to design. In this case it's going to be a logo, but mind you, we're not designing a logo not just yet. This is the basic, this is the essentials. This is kind of an introduction to Adobe Illustrator. So the first thing, as you can see, even from the beginning it still looks quite intimidating. Now when you get to this place, you probably don't know exactly what to do. So as a newbie, as a logo designer, what you want to do is you want to set up your document. So over here you might want to ignore everything you have here for now, please. You have some presets here, you want to leave those out of. Don't click anything, don't select any of it, just leave it the way it is, and go over here. You have your width and height. Now this is where you set your artboard, the size of your artboard, and everything you want to work with. So since it's a logo design, you're designing a logo, remember this is Adobe Illustrator for logo designers, strictly for logo designers. Yeah, so I like to work with squares, not rectangles, though most of the times what we work with on screens are rectangles, but since it's a logo design, I prefer my artboard to be a perfect square. And for it to be a perfect square, you have to make sure that the width and the height is of the same pixels or whatever parameters you're using to make sure. So I'm going to be using 1080 by 1080. You can use whatever you like depending, but I personally would advise you to go for 1080 by 1080. And if there's any other dimensions you like to use, it's also fine, but I prefer 1080 by 1080, and I think you should do the same. Now when you're done typing 1080 by 1080, please make sure the parameters is set to pixels. This PS right here simply signifies pixels, that's why it says PS right there. PS stands for pixels. Now you can actually change the parameters from here. You can change it from pixels to points. Point stands for PT. You can change it to picalary stands, which is represented by P0, or inches, which is represented by IN, or millimeters, mm, or centimeters, cm, but I prefer pixels. As you can see, px, 1080 by 1080 pixels. Now page orientation, you want to go for either portrait or landscape, but in this case we're using a square, and it doesn't matter what orientation you use, a square is a square. But if it were to be a rectangle, one side has to be longer than the other. Either the width is longer than the height, or the height is longer than the width. As you can see, this whole screen right here, my laptop screen, is a perfect rectangle. But if you notice, the width of my laptop, the width is from here to here, is longer than the height, which makes it a portrait rectangle. But if the height is longer than the width, that makes it a portrait, if my laptop is a landscape, sorry, that was a mistake. My laptop, the width is longer than the height, and that is a landscape. But if the height is longer than the width, that is a portrait. As you can see here, it's standing, that is a portrait. It's lying down, that is landscape. So the artboard, you want your artboard to be set to 1. You can set it to whatever you want, but I prefer to start with 1, point out blank 1. Now under bleeds, you have top, bottom, left, right. You want to leave these bleeds the way they are. Don't touch nothing, leave them at 0. So when you're done with that, I'm going to have to click on create, but I won't do that because I have set this thing up. So I'm going to pretend I clicked on create, but you should go ahead and click on create if you're following me. But I'm going to backspace, and this is what we have. So now ignore what I have here. Remember, I've done that already, so that, which is why you're seeing some of these things in here. And remember, we set our artboards to just 1, which is why you have 1 single art board. Now everything you have on your screen right now is called your workspace. Every single thing you can see right now, probably excluding this bottom part. This is not Adobe Illustrator, this is from my laptop, yeah. But aside here, every other thing you can see is called the workspace, and this workspace is divided into 7 components. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we're going to go into these 7 components one after the other. But before that, what is Adobe Illustrator? Adobe Illustrator is a vector graphics software. Now what is vector graphics? Now this is the reason why you have my image here. By the way, that handsome young man is me, and then you have also not so handsome looking young man, which is also me. Now there's a reason I brought these things in here for you. These are not just for show, please. There's a reason they are here. Now what is Adobe Illustrator? Adobe Illustrator is a vector graphics software, unlike its counterparts Adobe Photoshop. Now what is a vector graphics, you might ask? Let's explain what vector graphics is. Now vector graphics is a design, or a graphic design, that can be scaled in, that can be zoomed in, and it's going to still, no matter how much you scale it, it will maintain its quality, unlike the raster graphics software. Now let's do an experiment. This is a vector graphics. As you can see, it's vector because I designed it with Adobe Illustrator. Let us zoom in, let us scale this thing. Now if you scale it, as you can see, it is still sharp. The edges are still very sharp. It doesn't lose any single quality. That is the vector graphics. Let's do the same for the raster graphics, which is something you can find in Adobe Photoshop, not Illustrator. Now this is me, by the way, so I'm going to have to zoom in on this. Now notice how sharp this picture is looking from afar, right? It's okay, that's a quality picture. Some people might even call it HD, but let's zoom in on that. The more I zoom in, notice that it begins to lose its quality. The more I go, the more it loses its quality. Let's even go further and further and further and further. As you can see, that image has turned into tiny boxes. If you can see well, all we have on my screen right now is tiny boxes. So those boxes are called pixels. The image becomes very pixelated, and that is not a vector graphics. So that's the difference between raster graphics and vector graphics. Now let us go into the 7 components I talked about, starting from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now before we go into that, you want to make sure you have, now every single Adobe Illustrator designers have the presets they like to use, but for me, I like to use Essential Classics. You want to select this. Now this helps you change how this whole entire workspace looks like. Now let's see an example. Go for essentials, and as you can see, something just happened. A lot of things have disappeared. That doesn't mean that they're gone forever, but that's because I took them away because I think I don't need them, so I set it to essentials. Just the essential tools I need, that's what is visible. You can set it to layout, and it's going to decide what tools to display to you under layout. But the general one I advise you should use as a logo designer is Essential Classic, and that is the one that is going to display all 7 components I talked about, or I was going to talk about. At the top here, which is the first one we're talking about, you have the header. This part is called the header. Now up here you have a whole lot of menus, you get me, and some of these menus are going to help you to do a whole lot of things in Adobe Illustrator depending on what you're going to do at the time. Now there's a whole lot of them to be discussed, which I will not exactly go into at the moment, but we're going to get to the important ones as we proceed with this. Now Exactly below the header you have the control bar. Now it's also a very important part of the entire workspace because it is how do I put it, it's based on what you selected. It works according to the content of it, changes depending on what is selected. Now let's do a very quick experiment. Now look at this. It's okay, that's how it looks like. You have a whole lot of things here. You have preferences, document setup, style, opacity, stroke, and everything. That's just it. But if you select something now, it's going to change. As you can see, a whole lot of other options have appeared. The contents of it have changed because I selected something. Now if you select something different, this is an element, a shape, and if I select a text, it's also an entirely different story, as you can see. So depending on what you're working with, the content of this changes, and it helps you change the appearance of what you're working with. Now for instance, we're working with the text. That is the text right there, lorem ipsum, which is selected, and as you can see, it allows me work on the paragraph. Let's say this is a full text, like a block of text. You can edit the paragraph from here. You can make it smaller, it decrease its size, the size of the text. You can change the style of the text depending on the font you're using. If the font comes with several styles, you can change the style of the font. You can change the font name here, the font family. You can change the font from here. Opacity, stroke, you can add stroke to the text. You can change its color and everything. It allows you edit the appearance on whatever is selected. Now notice how it looks like here. Now let me select something that is not a text. Let me select a vector image. Let me select this shape right here. As you can see, it has changed to something entirely different. Now this is going to allow me, some of these buttons here are going to, some of these ones are the align tools. A whole lot of them here are used to align vertically, horizontally, and all of that stuff. This one is opacity, this one is out the stroke, and this one is also the stroke. You can increase the width, stroke width, and decrease the stroke width. As you can see here, if I continue to click on that, the stroke width is going to continue to increase. But if I click the downward arrow, the stroke width is going to decrease as I do that. Now exactly below the control bar, we have the last one at that top, which is the document bar. This signifies what each file you're working on. This shows what you're working on. Now probably if I've been working on several designs, several projects, you're going to have about more than 2 here. Now if I click on this, shows that I'm working on this particular file. If there's another one here and I click on it, it's going to take me back to the other projects I've been working on, and that's how it works. So that's exactly how it works. You can call it document bar or the document tabs, because there's usually more than one tab here, but I have just one. This is because I just launched this thing. But if I designed something yesterday and I didn't shut down Adobe Illustrator and I come back, you're probably going to find that new other tab, the one I've been working on yesterday, and I can just go back to it and click on it, but I have just one. So in case you come here sometime on your Adobe Illustrator and find more than one tabs here, it's good that you know what these tabs are for. Now moving away from the top 3, we have on the left hand side, we have the toolbar, which is one of the most interesting and most fun of them all. Now on here you have most of the tools you're going to be using to work on this Adobe Illustrator, on whatever it is you're working out. These designs you see here were made by me on Adobe Illustrator, and they were created mostly using the tools from here. So there are lots and lots of tools here, which I'm not going to go exactly into right now, but again, as we proceed with this, we are going to get into some of them as we design some very important things. All right, so on here you have a lot of the tools that you need, and some of the most important ones, which I'm already using, is the selection tool, which is this arrow here. You also have the direct selection tool and all of that. I wouldn't want to go very deep into that. You also have the rectangle tool and lots and lots of things. Now another thing I'm going to talk to you about is whenever you look at any of these tools, and you notice it has a very small arrow at its base right there at the right hand side of the base, just click on it or right click on it. You're going to see more options underneath it. As you can see right here, this is the eraser tool, but the eraser has a very small arrow there, which means that there are other tools under the eraser tools. To display them, right click, and you're going to display all the other tools underneath it. As you can see, there are other tools, but this one is the pen tool right here, which is also very important. But the pen tool, as you can see here, it has no arrow. If I right click on it, nothing happens, nothing shows. But this one on the other hand is delete anchor point tool. It has an arrow. Right click on that, another tool displays. So that's what happens when you notice that there's an arrow under any of the tools in the toolbar, which means that there are other tools underneath that particular tool. Now over to your right hand side, we've talked about the toolbar. Over to your right hand side, you have the panels. Now the panels also help you, they work kind of hand in hand with the tools. They help you, whatever it is you've created using this helps you modify the appearance of them. And for instance, this is a text. Let's assume I created this text using this, which I did by the way. Left click on that and you have a whole lot of options here that helps you edit what this text looks like. For instance, you have the character here. Under character, you can change the font like so. I'm going to choose Helvetica. Now under sim the same character, you can change the style of the Helvetica. Let's go for bold. Now you also have the text size. Click on this. As you can see, the text begins to grow in size and nope, not that. Now with this, you can also change certain things. Let's assume, or let's do this real quick. Double click on that. Now click on this. Helps you, reduce the line spacing between the texts that are stacked. You get me? So with that still selected, you can do a whole lot of things. You can just play around with every single thing you have here. Now you can also set paragraph and everything. You can work on the opacity of the text from here. As you can see, it's almost invisible because I reduced the opacity. Now under transform, you have a whole lot of things here. You have the rotate. You can rotate the text however you want, 30 degrees. You get me? And a whole lot of things. You can also mirror the text and whatever it is you want to do. This, like I said, these panels, it helps you. It works kind of hand in hand with the toolbar. Whatever it is you've created with the toolbar, the panels helps you edit its appearance. It helps you modify it a little bit further. Now I've worked a little bit on the text. Now let's work on not something that is not a text, a shape like this. As you can see, there's also different options for the shape. There's the stroke here. You can edit the stroke of it, as you can see there. You can also make it very transparent by working on opacity. You can mirror it and all of that stuff. Now down beneath everything, you have the status bar. Now this status bar is not exactly very important, but it shows you certain information about what you're working on. Informations like the zoom level, that is that right there. It shows you how much you've zoomed in, as you can see. It also shows you, which by the way, you can actually zoom in from here, but it just shows you the zoom level, helps you move sideways on your workspace and other stuff like that. Now the last but not the least, remember we've talked about all 6. Now the last but not the least, which is the artboard. This is where all the magic happens. This right here is, my friend, is the artboard. This is where all the magic happens. This is where you actually get to design. By the way, you can actually design outside the artboard, but you really want to keep your designs inside of the artboard. By the way, you can actually design outside of it, but you want to keep it inside. And you're not just limited to one artboard. You can create more than one by clicking here. As you can see, we have a couple of them, and you can also arrange according to how you want it to be like. Yep. So that is going to be that. Now we've talked about all of the components of this workspace. There are 7 of them. All right, so we're going to be seeing you in the next one.